The Gulf Stream is a powerful river of water between Florida and the Bahamas. It's quite wide, quite strong. And the point is, you do not want to cross the Gulf Stream with any strong north wind component, unless, for example, as I mentioned, you're a delivery captain, in which case you have the background and the skills to do that safely. You're vacationing, you're cruising, you're not out to be someplace at a specific time. So, why push it? Why make your life unpleasant? And by waiting out a northerly component of the wind, you're probably going to have to wait. And I've seen people wait as much as 2.5 weeks in Miami or in West Palm Beach before they were able to cross over to the Bahamas. And that's not uncommon. But you know what? It's not that bad. Palm Beach is a nice place. There's a great downtown, lots of great pubs, restaurants, things to see and do. Miami, same thing. Beautiful waters. If you want, go sailing on Biscayne Bay while you're waiting for the weather to change in your favor to cross to the Bahamas.
Là, c'est un webinaire. On va nous inviter à rejoindre un webinaire sur les Bahamas. Comment ça se fait?
Hein? C'est commencé?
Hang on a minute, folks. We have some. I'm going to mute everybody so we don't have any crosstalk. Okay, how do I mute everybody? Oh, would you know it? Okay, is everybody muted now? Great. Okay, where was I? Yeah, what you want to do when you're crossing over to the Bahamas, you want to get the Gulf Stream behind you to make your ride easier. Now, if you were to cross over, for example, straight from Miami to Bimini, which is almost directly east, what's going to happen is you're going to have the Gulf Stream on your beam. And if there's any wave action of the Gulf Stream at all, it's going to make for a very rocky and rolling ride. So what you want to do is get the wind stream behind you. Well, I'll explain how to do that in a minute. If you ever have the opportunity to listen to Dave Skolnick's Gulf Stream presentation, I highly, highly recommend it. Dave is a delivery captain who's crossed the stream many times, and he can give you excellent advice on how to cross the Gulf Stream. But the basics are, as I said, wait out easygoing weather. I've almost never crossed the Gulf Stream under sail. I've typically done it under motor because I wait for the calmest possible weather. I don't need any crazy challenges. And as much as I enjoy sailing, crossing the Gulf Stream under power, it gets me there, it's done, and I can sail for the next 3 months in the Keys. The big thing here is you're just going to have to be patient. If you're one of the lucky ones, you arrive in Miami, the weather's perfect, and over you go, great. Typically, you're going to wait, like I said, a week, maybe 2 weeks. Excuse me. Now, the charts that you want to bring, the standard for charts in the Bahamas are the Explorer charts. And they still are the standard that you want to bring. So pick up some Explorer charts. Now, Explorer electronic data. You want to be sure that you have the Explorer charts on your chart plotter. You're going to have to check with your manufacturer. There have been a lot of changes lately, and I can't find any accurate information on who is actually carrying the Explorer charts. It used to be Garmin, but that is not the case so much anymore. Now, trusted Explorer data, Explorer only data comes from CMAP, Map Media, MAC-C, Rose Point, Furuno, I should say, pardon me. If you're using Raymarine hardware, you want to check with the company. Explorer data is available, but it's not on all units. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can go to Aquamap. And I've mentioned Aquamap in some of our other seminars. It's available from the App Store or the Google Play Store, and it does use Explorer charts. Now, when you're crossing, if you're going to the Abacos, for example, okay, Palm Beach is where a lot of people like to cross to the Abacos. Now, Palm Beach to West End, now it's a straight line, is 54 nautical miles at a course of 102 magnetic. What that means is that you are sailing a little bit south, you're sailing into the Gulf Stream. Now, if you're running a power boat, if you're running a trawler with fairly powerful engines, that's fine. But if you're running a sailboat like mine with 20 horsepower, what that means is that that Gulf Stream is going to make your job a lot more difficult because it's pushing your boat north. So what happens is as it's pushing you north, you're having to turn more and more and more into the Gulf Stream. Let's see, where's that? You're having to turn more and more and more into the Gulf Stream, so that eventually you're almost heading south into it and probably going 2 or 3 knots. To give you an idea of how strong the Gulf Stream is, I was crossing one time years ago, and it was about 3 in the morning, and off to the south of me there were 2 or 3 freighters coming in my direction. So I decided that what I needed to do was to change directions to get out of their way. So I turned to the north into the Gulf Stream, or rather turned to the south into the Gulf Stream, and my boat went from 6.5 knots down to 3 knots. It virtually parked me. And I thought, well, that's not getting me out of the way of these boats as fast as I'd like. So I completed the circle, turned around the other way, and I then went from 3 knots to 8.5, 9 knots. So there's that much power in the Gulf Stream. It can slow you down that much. So keep that in mind. What you want to do is you want to get a few miles south. If you're going to the West End, for example, instead of leaving from Palm Beach, do an extra day's travel and sail down to Fort Lauderdale and run up from Fort Lauderdale. I'll explain that in a minute. If you're going to Memory Rock, that's a heading of 49, it's 49 nautical miles at 85 degrees magnetic. That's a little bit better. And if you're a deeper draft boat, then you will probably want to be going to Memory Rock, because the channel at West End, at low tide, you're limited to about 6 feet, maybe 6.5 feet. Now, the advantages of going in at West End, there's an anchorage there right beside the marina. There's, of course, easy to clear in there. There's a restaurant, lovely restaurant, and you can get fuel. The disadvantage is that the channel is shallow. Whoever just signed in, could you mute your computer, please? Oh, wait a minute, I can do that for you. There we go. Okay, where was I? The channel is shallow for the first 2 miles. If you draw much over 6 feet, you're going to have to be cautious, especially anywhere near low tide. Now, the advantages of Memory Rock, there, I don't know, there's no anchorage, there's no nothing there. It's just a place with a marker buoy. But it is a deep water entry to the bank. The big disadvantage is that there are still 50 miles to go to get to Great Sail Key, which is your first reasonable anchorage. So, you know, instead of just doing the 65 miles across, you've actually got 115 miles before you can put the anchor down and take it easy. Now, from West End onward to the Abacos, you can either marina, as I said, go to the marina, or you can anchor out. You take the Indian Channel, which brings you up, I think you can see my cursor here, on a run of about 45 degrees. You come up to Mangrove Key, which is just a small key. There's no anchorage there. There's no protection. Unless it's absolutely flat calm, you're not going to want to stay there. But then you can run all the way along, straight line into Great Sail Key right here. And there are a couple of excellent anchorages in Great Sail Key. If you're coming in from Memory Rock, it's another 45 miles, but it's a straight run across water of about 12 to 15, maybe 17 feet deep. Now, Great Sail Key, if you're coming in there, a lot of people will anchor up here in the bight. Okay, if the winds are anywhere out of the east, west, or the north, excellent protection there, excellent holding, good place to hang out if you've got any weather. There's not much there. There's no beach. You could go ashore and walk, but it's all basically a mangrove island. There's nothing on it. If the weather is, whoops, that wasn't supposed to happen. If the weather is settled, what I usually do is I will anchor where the top arrow is, where I'm showing you here on the northwest coast of Great Sail Key, and there's a big long stretch here. So if the weather is settled, I'll anchor there and then take off the next morning. And the other reason I like to anchor there is that there's a little beach where I can take my dog for a walk. Interesting story. I was anchored there, this must have been 3 years ago. And I hadn't had a chance to get my my Bahamas cellular package yet. So I left my phone on the boat. And I've really regretted that ever since, because on this occasion, I'm walking the dog, we're walking in the shallows, and I look off and about 100 feet away, I see this splashing. And I see fins splashing in the water, and clearly it wasn't dolphins, because they were big fish. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if it's not dolphins and they're that big, then they got to be sharks. So I put the dog on the leash and walked her back to the beach with me, and I walked around to see what was going on. And there were three sharks, and they were mating in the shallow water, about 2 feet, 2.5 feet deep. It was something I've never seen before, never heard of anybody seeing. And I really regretted not having my camera with me, or my phone with me, so I could have videoed it, because it was fascinating. But you see those things like this in the Bahamas, really unique sites like this all the time. But that's Great Sail Key right there. So from Great Sail Key, you can move on above to the top of the Exumas, or pardon me, the Abacos, and clear in at Marsh Harbor or Spanish Key. So here's Great Sail Key right there. Okay, so you come up around it, and then you start heading a little bit southeast, run all the way through, and then down along through to here. Okay. Marsh Harbor is not the most convenient place to clear in. You have quite a long walk to go, but you can clear in at Spanish Key, or you can clear in at Treasure Key, not Treasure Key, Green Turtle Key. Now, the other direction, Fort Lauderdale, if you're going to West End, Fort Lauderdale to West End is 68 nautical miles. It's a little longer, but it's 66 degrees magnetic. And it is just as fast because you've got the Gulf Stream behind you. And on top of that, it's a much easier ride, okay? You don't have the Gulf Stream slamming the side of your boat. So basically what you would do is you would follow this blue line here at the bottom. You would head out pretty much due east. And then once you get into the stream, aim your course a little bit further up, and then just aim straight for the West End. And the stream will carry you along, and you'll find your speed is quite good. You'll get there very quickly. Now, if you're going to Bimini, because you're going to the Abacos most likely, or to the Berry Islands, I typically from Miami will leave from No Name Harbor, which is on Key Biscayne, and to Bimini it's 48 nautical. Can't see my screen here, but it's 48 nautical miles, 45 nautical miles, pardon me, at a course of 91 degrees. So you're slightly running south if you're coming from Miami. Now, if you go south to Angelfish Cut, which is the second arrow here, okay, down here. If you go south to Angelfish Cut, anchor out there overnight, and head over to Bimini, it's 53 nautical miles, but an angle of 62 degrees magnetic. So again, you get that advantage of having the Gulf Stream behind you and not slamming into the side of your boat, and you speed up quite a bit to do it that way. Now, if you're coming from Marathon or from the lower Keys, then a good spot to take off from is Rodriguez Key, way down here at the bottom. That is 71 nautical miles, but your course is anywhere from 68 to 72 degrees. So again, you're getting an even bigger push from the Gulf Stream. Now, if you wanted to, from either one of these places, Angelfish Cut or Rodriguez Key, run straight east heading out. This is what I usually do, is run straight east heading out until I'm well in the Gulf Stream. And then I get an even better angle, more like 60 degrees or 58 degrees, running up to Bimini. Okay, data sources for the Gulf Stream. Now, there's more than this, obviously, but these are some that people have used in the past regularly. You have the NOAA site, and this will be all recorded on the online for tomorrow. So don't worry about that, or else you can just take a quick screenshot if you want. You have the other site down there. If you're into Gribs, if you're a real weather guru and you use Gribs, you can use the RTOFS forecast at saildocs.com, or you can get the analysis from svsarana.com if they're still publishing, I'm not sure. Also, you can map the sea temperature, which will tell you, and there are graphs that'll do that for you, that will tell you where the Gulf Stream actually is sitting. Now, the entrance to Bimini, anybody who's been around for a while did Bimini before the new entrance. And that was always interesting, because what you had to do was you came in more to the more to the south, and then you would line up a marker on the shore and a palm tree, and you would follow them in a range till you're about, call it 50, 60 feet offshore. That would put you in about 8 to 10 feet of water. You would then hang a left and then follow the deep water. And by the way, 8 to 10 feet of water in the Bahamas is deep water. You would follow the deep water all the way into Bimini up till when you get to the marker buoys, which start around here and then run in. Well, nowadays there are markers right here. They've cut a big channel through the reef here. Now, keep in mind, as often as not, these markers are not in position. So pay close attention as you're coming in and make sure that they are either on spot or that you are in deep water. So you just come straight in through the markers, and again hang a left, and then just follow the buoys into Allistown if you're clearing it at Allistown. The key to cruising in the Bahamas is watching the color of the water. Okay, if the water is brown or yellow, that's not good. And some of you are grinning because you're thinking of other reasons it's not good. But what brown or yellow water means is that it's shallow water. You're looking for blue, anywhere from a light blue to a dark blue, because those indicate deeper water. And the water is usually crystal clear. Now, that being said, in the Abacos, the water tends to be more of a greenish, more of an emerald color. But again, you'll get that shading in the water. So just pay attention to that. And you can almost, I can't think of any place in the Bahamas you can't see the bottom. So you run in and you can tie up one of the marinas, Browns, Blue Water, Bimini, Great American, or you can go all the way up to the top to the casino and go to the marina there if you want. Something to remember is that there's a lot of traffic at certain times of the year, especially weekends. There's a lot of sport fishers, 24, 26, 30-foot sport fishers coming out of Miami. And then, of course, you've got the mailboat. You want to watch out for the mailboat. The VHF rules are not what they are in the United States. People talk all the time on 16 and pay no attention to the fact that it's a hailing and emergency channel. And there's the mailboat. So you don't want to be challenging him for the channel if he's coming in or going out. Now in Bimini, you can tie up at the government dock or at one of the marinas. The customs people do not want you to anchor out to clear, and they want you to tie up there. Now, if you tie up here at the government dock, it's a free dock. If you're going to one of the marinas, just clear into the marina. The customs office is quite close. And from the customs, they'll send you across the immigration, which is across the street. And you'll typically be done in an hour. And if you use click to clear, you don't even have to do that. Okay, so clearing into the Bahamas, if you're doing it in person, they're incredibly courteous, professional people. The fees have changed. I'll come into that in a bit. If you haven't used click to clear and you're clearing in person, the fee has changed and it's payable in cash. If you're in Bimini, there's an ATM quite nearby. And make sure that you have your passports and your boat documents all handy. Now, if you're Canadian, the entry requirements are you don't require a visa to visit. Neither do Americans, of course. Your passport should be not less than 3 months remaining. And you should have, the rules state you should have a return ticket. But of course, if you're coming on a boat, the boat qualifies as your return ticket. Now, be aware of customs duty. Customs duty ranges anywhere from 0% to 210%, depending on what you're purchasing, okay? The only things that come in, that I'm aware of, that come in duty-free that apply to you and I are going to be motor parts. So for example, if like me, you have to replace a depth sounder. Okay, the depth sounder was $95. The cost to clear that depth sounder in were somewhere around $45 or $50. Okay, and that didn't include having to get a hold of somebody at West Marine in the United States and then getting it shipped over. So it was a bit of a challenge. If you're having something brought over and you can have a friend bring it over who's following you, that's oftentimes the easiest way to do it. The rates for shipping anything in are outlined in the Tariff Act of 2002, and you can locate that on the web if you want to find it. Now, boarding fees are fees charged for the entering of pleasure vessels, of course. For pleasure vessels up to 35 feet in length, the fee is $150. For vessels over 35 feet, the fee is $300. A little tip for you to remember, whatever you bring in is ship stores. If you bring in 20 cases of beer, if you bring in 24 bottles of rum, and whatever you're bringing in, it is ship's stores, okay? So don't get into this thing about declaring every little item that you've brought in with you. Just when you fill out the documentation, ship stores is what it is. Now, if you decide that you want to extend your stay in the Bahamas beyond the initial 3 months, you have to visit the immigration office in whatever area you're in and complete the relevant application. And to do so, you must present the following: a valid passport, a landing, immigration, arrival, departure card, and again, a return airline ticket or evidence of returnability, which is, of course, your boat. Now, if you should leave the Bahamas for some reason, if you have to fly out on business or family affairs, bring a copy of your cruising permit with you. Don't forget that, okay? Because what will happen is that you'll have a hard time getting back without it. The other thing to remember, if you have a pet, if you have a dog or a cat and you bring the dog or cat out with you and not on your boat, you're going to have to redo the entry requirements for the dog or cat, okay? I made that mistake one time, and I went from where was I was in Marsh Harbor. So I flew out of Marsh Harbor to Fort Lauderdale, brought the dog with me, went down to Key West. I was leading a rally of boats to Cuba. And from Cuba, so we went to Cuba. We spent a week or 10 days, whatever it was in Cuba, came back. And then I flew back to Marsh Harbor. And the immigration officer basically said that they were going to have to take my dog because I didn't have the new clearance papers, the new shots and tests and everything for it. And I'm not sure you can imagine how upset I was. I basically looked at her. I says, if that's the case, I said, I will get on the plane. I will leave immediately. And she said, no, you can't. You're here now. You have to deal with this. Anyway, she reneged. She let it go. But I've never been more frightened in my life because I thought I was going to lose my dog. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now the 2024 fee structure, which I mentioned, vessels not exceeding 34 feet is $150 for 3 months, $300 for 12 months. Pleasure vessels exceeding 34 feet are $300 and $600. And if you're one of the lucky ones who has a pleasure vessel exceeding 100 feet, but not more than 150 feet, your fee is $500 for 3 months and $1,000 for 12 months. Anyway, you can see what the fees are. Personally, I think that for pleasure vessels exceeding 200 feet, $1,000 is a pretty cheap price, because if they can afford that vessel, they can certainly afford more than $1,000 for 3 months. And by the way, there are places where you go to, like Highborn Key down in the Exumas, where you'll be anchoring out amongst these huge mega yachts, and not just one of them, but half a dozen or more of them. It's really stunning. You'll see that the odd time in Marsh Harbor as well. You'll see one or two big ones in there, usually on a regular basis. Your fees include your cruising permit fee, your fishing permit, but make sure you ask for a fishing permit. It includes the attendance fees for both Bahamas customs and immigration officers, their transportation fees, and it includes the reentry of your vessel if it is within 90 days. So you made it. And there's one of the lovely ladies from Bahamas Customs. This was that first trip that I did, and I was rather pleased with myself. Now you can get out and go hog wild on Pig Beach. And actually in the Bahamas, there's not one Pig Beach, there's now two. There's one in the Exumas over by Staniel Key, which is one that everybody knows about. But there's also one up by No Name Key in the Abacos. These are wild. Did anybody ever see the movie Wild Hogs? If you've never seen it, get a copy of it and watch it. It's a funny movie about some guys experiencing their middle ages on Harleys, and it's quite a funny movie. And mentioning these wild hogs made me laugh, remembering the movie. But anyway, the wild hogs are there. They're quite entertaining. But remember, they can get aggressive. They're coming to you for food. Don't bring a dog onto the beach because they will go after the dog. Okay, they'll often swim out to your dinghy looking for food as well. So it's quite entertaining.
There's also one at Nassau, Wally, and right near Nassau. I can't remember the name of the key. It's a 15-minute ride, and there's another one right by Georgetown now as well. So there's 4 of them.
Oh, there's 4 of them. I hadn't heard about the other 2 new ones. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. How are you guys doing, by the way? I haven't heard from you in ages.
Doing really well. Just getting ready to head south again.
Where are you at now?
Sitting in Dutchman's Cove.
Dutchman's Cove.
You used to live there.
Oh, you're up in Penetang?
Yeah.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Okay, I was thinking of another Dutchman's down in South Carolina, and I'm thinking, why does Dutchman's Cove sound so familiar? Well, cool. When do you expect to be down here?
Oh, January sometime, but I'll be fooling around in Florida for a month or 2.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll run across you. Anyway,
yeah.
Back to our scheduled program.
More pigs.
Now I'm going to have to update my seminar. Okay, so from So from Bimini, you're on to Chub Key. Now, when you're crossing the banks, okay, the banks is a significant trip. It's from Bimini to the Northwest Channel, which is in the center here, right there. That's 65 nautical miles. Northwest Channel to Chub is about 14 miles. Now, Chub has become completely private now, which means you can anchor out, but you cannot go ashore at all. The marina has become extremely expensive. I'm not sure how many people would want to pay those fees to tie up there. However, if you want, you can go a little bit further around. There's an anchorage just around this side of the island where it turns up to the left, and I can't think of the name of the anchorage off the top of my head. But it's a lovely spot, lovely spot. So from Northwest Channel to Andros is 22 nautical miles. From Northwest Channel to Nassau is 49 nautical miles. And Chub to Nassau is 36 nautical miles. So you've got a variety of choices to make there if you want to break it up. What I typically do when I'm coming from Bimini, like you can come from North Bimini, go around the top, you can come around the south, you can go further down to Cat Key, you can go all the way down to Castle Rock, depending on the winds if you want to sail. Okay, so you can typically sail your way to Chub or to Northwest Channel. What I will typically do when I get to Northwest Channel, and this chart is not detailed enough to show it, is I'll run about a quarter of a mile off the charted course and I'll put the anchor down. Now, this is one of the few places in the world where you can put an anchor down and you can look around your boat 360 degrees. You will not see land. There is no land in sight anywhere. Okay. But if you're going to anchor overnight there, and I suggest you do, what you want to do is get about a quarter of a mile off the beaten path and make sure that you have a really good anchor light up. Because what happens is that during the night, you'll often see small freighters, the mail boat, and other commercial traffic from the Bahamas coming through the Northwest Channel, heading in either direction. Usually, however, they're headed west towards Bimini. And you want to be well off their course, okay, so that you don't have to worry about, so they don't have to worry about running into you. So, where are we here? Oops. As I was saying, you have a variety of routes to the banks. So if you're a sailor, you can go with whatever wind is blowing. Now, passage consideration for the banks. Number one is weather. Okay, like it's 17, 18 feet deep most of the way. What that means is that if the wind is strong out of the north anywhere, you're going to be getting some wave action. Okay, and it's actually gets strong enough. I've seen people leave Bimini. Oh, it's just 12 knots of wind. We can power through that, no problem. And they show up about 6-7 hours later looking like they've been beaten with a hammer. Because it gets really rugged out there because it's so shallow. So you want to watch the winds, and they either are not too strong out of the east or northeast, or you've waited till after a weather front has come through and you've got a northwest or a west wind behind you so that you can sail the trip. Now, as I mentioned, there we go. As I mentioned, you can anchor out at Northwest Passage. You can anchor at Chub Key, or there's the name, Fraser Hog Key was the one I was trying to think of. And then from there, you can run on straight on to Nassau. Or if you want to find a nice place to anchor out in Nassau, go to West Bay, which is obviously on the west end of the island. It's possible to get to shore there. It's over by the airport. You could probably call a cab if you had to. I don't know if Nassau has Uber. I've never tried it. I actually spend very little time in Nassau if I can avoid it, because I'm not going to the Bahamas to go to a city. One of the things to consider if you want to get a good weather for crossing the banks is to consider a weather router, somebody like Chris Parker, who will give you a one-off forecast. Now, as I mentioned, it's important to pick your weather for the channel or for the passage, and you can see why. This chart's a little more detailed. You can see you can anchor either north of the Northwest Channel or a little bit south, because there's lots of depth in either direction. If there's any wind at all, what I'll often do, okay, hang on a minute. Computer and I are fighting. Right here, above to the north of Northwest Channel, there's a series of shallow banks. They're usually covered by 6 inches of water. But in between these shallow banks, there are some deep channels. And by deep, I'm talking, again, Bahamas deep, 7 or 8 feet deep. And you can go a fair ways up them and anchor in them quite safely. And what they do is, if you have any wave action on your trip through, those little banks will break up the wave action and give you a pleasant night's sleep. That will not happen if you anchor off the channel to the south of it, because there's nothing there to break up the wave action. Okay. Now, from Nassau, obviously, where are you going next? Are you going to Eleuthera? Are you going to the Exumas? You know, it's all good. You can run straight across a little bit to the southeast, or you can run a little bit to the northeast, up to the top of Eleuthera, and then run all the way down the inside of it. Eleuthera is an island. I've been there once on a delivery many, many years ago. God, 15, 14 years ago, something like that. And I anchored outside of Governor's Harbor, and I never got off the boat. We were doing a delivery. It was like hop in the boat, go, hop in the boat, go. It's gorgeous. And I've been wanting to go back for many years. And every time something comes up that I haven't been able to make it, all kinds of beautiful, beautiful beaches. The only problem with Eleuthera is that when the winds come out of the northwest or the north, especially the northwest, you have got no protection whatsoever anytime you're down along this section or down along here. So you've got to watch the weather so that you don't get caught by one of these northers and get pushed ashore or dragged. Now, if you're going to the Exumas, obviously you come out of Nassau, and then you just head straight down. Now, the problem with that is that you have the white banks and you have the yellow banks and you have coral heads. Now, oftentimes people show you running a straight course like the arrow that I showed in the previous screen, or this arrow here, down like that. Instead, when you come out of Nassau, head straight south till you're just below the yellow bank, and then you can either run southeast to Norman's Key, or you can run straight east over to Ship Channel Key, and then work your way down the inside where there's lots of water here to sail safely. But that way you avoid the yellow banks and the white bank. Now, provisioning. People always ask me about provisioning, whether it's the ICW, whether it's Nassau, whatever. Okay, provisioning is a very individual thing. And if you really want to know about provisioning, my suggestion is you go to Google. Now, Google will give you 103,000 results. Instead, let me back up. Instead, what you can do, if you want hints on provisioning, go to Carolyn Sherlock's site, theboatgalley.com. Carolyn has researched the heck out of this issue, and she can tell you everything you'll need. She's also spent a great deal of time in the Bahamas. She and her husband have swallowed the anchor. They're living ashore now, but she's still active. She'll be at the Annapolis Boat Show. And if you're looking for advice on provisioning in Cuba, or sorry, not Cuba, in Bahamas, she's the lady to be looking for that kind of information. I mean, you know, I could tell you one thing, and if you don't like asparagus, you're not going to like my advice, for example. Now, if you're looking for American-style grocery stores, you'll find one in Nassau, two of them in Nassau, I think. There's one in Freeport, and there's one in Marsh Harbor, which is called Maxwell's. There's a couple of stores in Georgetown and Long Island, but those are really the only largish grocery stores that you'll find on the island. Everything else is small stores, and a certain amount of markets sometimes that you'll find. So it makes it a bit of a challenge. What you need to do is you need to stock up with everything that you think you need. Some of the things that you want to be sure you bring with you are any of your perennial favorites, such as your favorite brand of coffee, chocolate, if you like chocolate, anything for your pet. Pet foods are both hard to find and expensive. Don't bring rum. Rum is cheap. You can get a bottle of Fire into Hole for under $10. And while that's not the best rum in the world, it does do the job. Beer is expensive. Bring as much beer as you can. Soda is, and for our northerners, hop is very expensive. So bring as much of that as you can if you happen to like those things. So stock up on the things that are expensive in the Bahamas and leave everything else till when you get there. Now, if you're in Georgetown and you're going shopping, that means a dinghy ride where you go under the bridge there and then hang a left over to the dinghy dock that the store has put out. That's also where you get your water if you don't have a water maker. And for those who need a water maker, please remember, I do sell water makers. But if you want tap water, you can fill up there. Now, a little tip for you if you don't have a water maker, every day bring a 5-gallon jug with you and fill it. And then just keep refilling your tanks 5 gallons at a time. If you leave it till you have to carry 8 jugs, that's 700 pounds of water. It's 8 jugs times 40 times 8. That's 320 pounds of water. You don't want to be doing that. So just do it a little bit at a time. It'll make your life a lot easier. Don't ask me how I know this, but trust me, I've done it the hard way. Okay, I mentioned the boat galley. If this video is this screen is out of location. The picture on the right is a friend of mine who provisioned in fact, Mark, were you there when that couple was leaving for the Bahamas? You weren't there 25 years ago, were you? Mark and Jane in Penetang?
Yeah, no.
Okay, that picture was taken in Penetang at our marina. Anyway, what happened was they were on one of these private trimarans and they probably bought out the local IGA. They brought, you can see they had cans of pop, they had cases of pop, they had cases of toilet paper, cases of paper toweling. They had, I have no idea where they put all this stuff. Okay, first of all, as you're coming down the east coast of the United States, you're going to be able to provision every 20 or 30 miles at a minimum. So you don't need to load your boat down when you're coming south as if you're going into the wilderness. And when you finally get south, whether it's Palm Beach or Miami, just hit whatever your favorite provisioning place is. Mine happens to be Total Wines and Liquors, or sorry, it happens to be Walmart. And a little plug there for Total Wines and Liquors. Good place to get any booze you're bringing across. But you don't need to load your boat down until you get there. And once you get there, like I said, get the stuff that you think you need. Pet food, beer, wine. Cheese is expensive and hard to find. If you still have lead acid batteries, make sure that you bring distilled water. That also is very difficult to find in the Bahamas. And a little tip for those who are coming down the ICW, make very, very certain if you have lead acid batteries that you check your batteries every 3 days, 5 days, because you're running your boat on motor a lot more. It's getting charged a lot more, and it's going to be gassing off the water in your batteries. Every year I hear of people who get down to the Miami and they suddenly find out that their lead acid batteries are finished because they ran out of water. The water gassed off. So check the water. As far as bread goes, crackers, you can bring crackers. They'll usually stay good. Bread, just buy local bread. Coconut bread, if you've never had coconut bread, is wonderful. It's almost like dessert. It's so good. Oops, okay. Weather information. You, of course, have NOAA on your radio, but you won't get NOAA past Bimini or West End. If you have a single sideband or ham radio, you, of course, have Chris Parker. And then, of course, there's the internet where everybody goes. You can go to passageweather.com, Sailflow, Predict Wind. My personal favorite is windy.com. And if you have a DeLorme InReach, they now have a weather option, or what I used to do when I was in Cuba, where internet was unavailable and weather was hard to get. I would text using my DeLorme InReach to a friend of mine in the United States, who would then get me a weather forecast for the north coast of Cuba. And I would then use that weather forecast. So if you have a DeLorme InReach, that's another way of getting weather. One of the things to do, and I mentioned this a bit earlier about Georgetown, watch the sky and learn the weather patterns. The weather in the Bahamas in the winter when we're there is typically very, very predictable. You're going to have anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 days of absolutely beautiful weather, light breezes out of the southwest, sorry, not the south, the east to northeast in the winter, and then usually the east to the southeast in the summertime. And then all of a sudden the winds will start to move into another quadrant, and that's when you know you've got a norther coming, and it's like clockwork. Now here's Windy again. It's available as a phone app. It's got a ton of information on it. It'll give you wind, it'll give you waves, it'll give you the swells, it'll tell you what rain or thunder to expect. It's got radar, it's got satellite. It uses a number of different models. And when you're crossing to the when you're crossing the Gulf Stream, Windy can be very, very useful, because what happens is you check the weather models. Okay, now if you go through 3 different weather models and each one of them looks different, that's not good. What you want is you want the weather models all to look the same. The more they are similar to each other, the more agreement there is, the less likely you're going to get a rude surprise like 35 knot winds out of the north as you're crossing to Bimini. Oh, there we go. You can see now how it works there. You can see the winds moving. You can see that little arrow that shows the actual wind speeds as they change. You can see how the weather's getting a little snotty, but it's out of the west. That would make for a sporty crossing, but you'd be able to cross under those conditions. Now, if you're up in Foxtown or if you're up in Marsh Harbor, things are going to get a little bit messy. Marsh Harbor would probably be rough under those conditions. This is the problem in the Bahamas, as I mentioned. Anything out of the northwest to the north is probably going to be challenging weather, and you want to be aware of it coming off. Okay, now phone and internet. The one that I recommend is the company Alive, and their website is bealive.com. They have inexpensive data roaming plans for your phone from about 20 bucks. What I usually do though is I buy this little router thing. Okay, it's about 3 inches, 4 inches wide by 2 or 3 inches high, and it picks up the signal. And what it then does is it transmits the signal in an area around your boat. Now, what I usually do is I'll carry it in my pocket and I'll use the internet function for my phone. And that way I don't have to give up my phone number. The other nice thing about this router thing is that if you're in someplace like Great Sail Key where internet access is almost impossible to get, you take your little router, you put it in a plastic bag, and you tie a line on that. You tie that line to a flag halyard or something, and you raise the router halfway up the mast, or maybe a little higher if you need to. And what will happen is it will pick up the signal, and you will get internet good enough that you can stream movies, even in some place like Great Sail Key. So that's a real nice feature about that particular one. I usually buy the $90 a month package. It's not cheap, but it does the job. And then, of course, some of us will have Starlink. Everybody's talking about how wonderful Starlink is. My understanding, I don't have it. My understanding is that they've changed the Starlink package, and it's become almost prohibitively expensive in the Bahamas. If you want more information, there is a couple of Facebook pages for Starlink on boats that you can check out. Okay, dining out. Dining out can go anywhere from reasonably inexpensive if you're going to a local place that tourists don't go to, or it can get crazy like at McDuff's on what island is it on? It's the one with the wrecked plane in the Exumas. The last time I was there, it was $25 US for a burger plus tax plus gratuity. And yes, I had a burger when I was there. The first time it was only $17, but it was one of those like, okay, I got to go there and do this thing. Or you can go to someplace like My Three Daughters and get a full meal for the time under $15, probably under $20 now. My Three Daughters is on Bimini, and it's a much more of a local place. Good food, no alcohol. If you want a beer with your meal, you have to bring it. And you'll find a number of places, the local places, especially in the Bahamas, that don't do alcohol. The local coconut bread I mentioned, this is Nate's Variety on Bimini. From the beach, you go up to the King's Highway, which is, I'm going to say it's 2 blocks up, and you have a beautiful view of the Atlantic from King's Highway, and then walk to the north and just watch for the sign for Nate's. Excellent, excellent coconut bread. If you're in Great Harbor Key and you're at the marina at Great Harbor, you can order coconut bread directly from the marina, and again, it's quite good. If you're into spearfishing, and this is why you got to make sure that you tell them that you want your fishing license when you get your cruising permit, when you clear in. Spearfishing and lobstering. This is a friend of mine who lives on the islands. This guy makes the rest of us look like amateurs. I had another friend like this from Montreal, Jean-Pierre. And anytime Jean-Pierre went out snorkeling, he'd bring his spear with him, and he'd come back with grouper, he'd come back with lionfish, he'd always come back with lobster, and I would come back, well, with an empty pail. I'm just not real good at spearfishing, unfortunately. Anyway, if you like fish, if you like seafood, some of the reef fish are really excellent. And if you get a chance, if you see a triggerfish and you can catch one of those, probably one of the best eating fish you'll find in the Bahamas. This was my skills. Okay, that was the first. Though on the left was the first thing I ever spearfished. It was a ray. Rays are easy because they're sitting on the bottom, and I virtually stabbed it with the spear rather than shot the spear at it. A bit of a challenge to clean, however. On the right-hand side is my lobster training chart. And my friend Jean-Pierre made that for me to help me out. That's a dead lobster in the middle of it. And the two rules he told me to be a good lobster hunter was I could have no sex and no wine. And I thought, screw it, I don't need lobster that bad. Okay, sundowners on the beach. As you go through the Bahamas, you're going to meet people, other cruisers everywhere you go, whether it's Bimini, whether it's West End, whether it's Treasure Key, Spanish Key, Marsh Harbor, whatever. And you'll make friends you'll run into often, and very often you'll get together for sundowners on the beach, and it's just a matter of bringing your own libation and something to share with the crowd. Yard art in the Exumas. Walking through some of these villages is really, really entertaining. And you'll see all sorts of interesting stuff that people put together as art in their yard. This was one of the ones I took a picture of, Tranquility. And the people are just wonderful. They appreciate the fact you come to visit their home, and they want to share it with you. Places like Black Point, which is just in the top of the Exumas, or the middle of the Exumas, pardon me. Very, very lovely spot there. This is a cruise ship arriving in Nassau. Obviously, he has the right of way, and I gave it to him. This was down in Staniel Key. Every afternoon when the sport fishers come back in and the fishermen come back in, they're cleaning the fish they've caught, and they throw the entrails into the water. So you get a bunch of usually nurse sharks like these ones. And these are pretty harmless. I was there one day getting into my dinghy at the dinghy dock, and it was entertaining. There was a bunch of tourists oohing and awing. So I happened to have my GoPro with me. So I put my GoPro into the water, and I was taking pictures of it. Everybody's, aren't you afraid you're going to get bit? It's a nurse shark. I've only ever heard of a nurse shark biting one person, and it wasn't a big bite. There's a close-up picture of them. Those ones were that one on the right was 5-6 feet. One time I was in Allen, Pensacola Key, and Allen's Pensacola is just north of Great Sail Key in the Abacos. It's got a beautiful harbor, fairly large. And again, you'll find this all the time in the Bahamas. You'll find these lovely anchorages. Nobody lives there. There's not a human soul on the entire island. You can go to the beach, you can hang out, you can wander, visit, explore, and there won't be another person within 50 miles. It's really something special about the Bahamas. But anyway, to get back, so I brought the boat into Allen's Pensacola Key. I dropped the anchor, and all of a sudden there's about a 7-foot nurse shark coming towards the boat. And obviously what was happening is that people who were anchoring there were tossing food over for the shark to eat. So he knew that anytime he saw an anchor, he would come over looking for food. But at that time I was fairly new, and I happened to notice another boat in the anchorage. The guy's out snorkeling and spearfishing, and I thought to myself, he's doing this with a shark in the water? And I'm from Northern Ontario. The most fearsome thing we have in Northern Ontario is a black fly, which is about the size of a head of pin. And they will drive a 1,200-pound moose out of the swamp, but they can't kill you, and they won't eat you. To me, sharks are just not something I want to share the water with. Okay, in the Abacos, you've got the Hopetown Lighthouse. Hopetown is just gorgeous. You can either go inside and take a mooring ball, or you can anchor outside and then bring a dinghy in. There's a dinghy dock there that you can tie up to and go wandering in the town. Beautiful town. Not very Bahamian. And I say that in the sense that there's not a lot of local people. So it's a white population, basically. If you want the real Bahamas, you have to go down to the Exumas. The Abacos it's nice and I like it. It's Americanized. It's the best term I can use. You'll get a lot of sport fishers, a lot of small boats that come out of Florida and come flying out there. And although there's a lot of cruisers, it's a different experience than is the Exumas. There's the lighthouse. The lighthouse is open. You can climb to the top of it. The view is spectacular. This is Green Turtle Key. I love Green Turtle Key. I spend a lot of time there every year. You can go into either White Sound or Black Sound. White Sound, they have they have a couple mooring balls in each one. The holding, especially in White Sound, in some places is not good. You have to look around and try and spot one of the areas where there's some sand instead of grass, and then get a hook down. And even at that, there's not a lot of sand over the coral. So if there's any kind of weather coming, you either want to be on your boat or you want to take a mooring ball for the night. But it's a really pretty little town, lots of funky little scenic houses and alleyways and things like this one. There's another view of Green Turtle Key looking across the little bay. off to the right is the city dock, the town dock where the ferry comes in. Something to remember is that when you're in the Abacos, there is a grocery service where you can order groceries from Marsh Harbor, and they will bring them to whatever dock you're at. And it's quite a convenient service. I've used it several times. I don't have the number handy. Anybody in the Abacos can give it to you. And then there's Great Guanakee, which is where Nippers was. Nippers has been reopened after having been torn apart by Hurricane Dorian. It is very touristy, and on Sundays it's just crazy. But Nippers on Sunday can be a lot of fun. The saying here is that it's better in the Bahamas, but it's gooder in Guana, and I'm not going to argue with that. It's a fun spot to visit. This is the point. When you get to the Bahamas, don't be in a rush to leave any place. Take your time, explore it, have fun, get to know the place, get to know a few of the people. You know, the only thing about the next place is that you'll find that you love it just as much as the last place. The islands are beautiful, the people are peaceful. When I was at the little story, when I was at Bimini, after they built the casino, I anchored out in a little bay just behind the casino. It's a convenient protected spot, especially if there's any weather. So I took my dinghy into the dock and I tied up, and I went up to the dockmaster and I said, "Hey, is there any problem with my tying my dinghy there so I can go ashore?" And he says, "Just be the Bahamas, man. You be good." And I just thought, cool. I mean, it's just completely so relaxing. I mean, I often wonder why people spend entire winters in Florida on their boats when 50 miles away there's this kind of vibe and pleasant lifestyle to live. So anyway, questions. Do we have any questions about the Bahamas that I can answer for you?
Hi, Wally. Yeah, I have a question about we're bringing our dog across. We got the permits, but they specify 48 hours before you enter, you got to get the vet to sign off.
No,
Do-
they won't
no?
fuss about that. Did you use Wellington?
Yes, we did.
Okay, yeah, like Wellington's your best source of advice, but they won't fuss with you about the 48-hour things. What that actually is, in fact, they've never asked me about it. What it actually is they want a vet there to check the dog over at 48 hours, and they won't make you do that. So if Wellington's got your papers for you, he'll everything's good. And I'll tell you a little story again. This guy did all the paper. This goes back years ago. This guy did all the paperwork, and he had everything ready for his dog, and he's clearing in. And I don't know whether it was Bimini or West End. Doesn't matter. It makes no difference. He might have even gone as far as NASA to clear it. But the guy's going through his paperwork, and the guy says, "Well, here's my rabies vaccine certificate for the dog, and and the guy looks at him and says, "Man," he says, "we don't be caring about the dog, man. The dog not be spending no money here." So, clearly they have their priorities. Another story: guy come into the Bahamas, and he brought his dog with him, and he had done nothing. He hadn't gotten the paperwork. He hadn't cleared with this is before Wellington was doing this. So, but what he did do is he had a $20 bill in his hand. So after he cleared out of the country, after he cleared into the country, and in fact, you know what, it had to be Bimini because Bimini fits the story. He went down the street, and Bimini, unfortunately, there's a number of layabouts, people who they don't work, they drink too much, they hang around. They're not dangerous, they're just what they are. So he goes up to the one guy, he says, "Here's $20, sign this paper." And what the paper was, it was a receipt for a dog. So if anybody asked him about his dog from then on, he had bought the dog in Bimini. It was a local dog and therefore didn't need papers to be cleared in. So I thought that was rather an imaginative way to do it. I wouldn't try it, but it worked for him apparently. Okay, anybody else? Questions? Yes? No? Okay, that's it for now, folks. Thanks for joining me. I will be putting this video online if there's anything you want to refresh. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at icw.wally@gmail.com or sail to the sun or wally@sailtothesun.com. Available at all of those sites. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have that I can help you with. Thanks very much for joining me tonight. I'm going to go and get a good night's sleep because I'm going to be spending tomorrow sanding the boat. Do I know how to have fun or what? Thanks again, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.